Not exactly hidden. The duel isn't. Well, it is, but it isn't. It's a drunken slap fight with two fire-breathing idiots. Neither one is really hurting the other, just kicking up a fuss, and apparently this counts as enough of a duel that the music has gone down to less ear-gouging levels. Now, if only the lights could be dimmed a few lumens so the glare of everything shining and sparkling could go down a touch too. The slap fight continues for a few minutes, and during which Koga leans over to ask Uthtir a few questions. I must admit I've not been immersed in Apuk culture long enough to actually know a few things. But does this really count as a duel? Technically? Uthtir asks. This is technically a fight in a formal setting, and it's not going to be to the death. I've heard of these two. They're the 8th and 14th daughters of the Psalm Duchy, Terry Foos offers. Yes, it's usually these two that start the nightly dueling when they get drunk and belligerent enough. Uthtir confirms and Koga frowns. So wait, just how favored is the firstborn? What's going on? Most information on the psalm was about how successful each and every son and daughter of the current Duchess was, and just how ready Alara was to take over if her mother ever considered retirement. Also, it had taken an annoyingly long time for him to realize that Alara Psalm was the name of the mother and the eldest child, which really shows the ego and favoritism. But he didn't think it went so far as to cause a brawl like this, not consistently. It really goes to show how just digging into the local information network is not enough for information gathering. You need boots on the ground and listening devices in the rooms. What's going on is that the Duchess Psalm is an ancient ruler with no sign of retirement in sight. She has personally seen to it that every single family line in her duchy is as wealthy as some entire cities. The woman does an amazing job. No one wants her to retire, and she doesn't either. Her biography is more or less a master thesis for how and why having a command class works. Uthtir begins before letting out a sigh. However, no one is perfect, and her failings are fairly plain. For as much as she understands ruling, she does not understand motherhood. She may have nearly 24 children and been blessed with an unusually large number of sons, but she's less a mother and more a doting master to many pets. So this entire affair, Koga asks, glancing around as everything starts to fall into place. Just how gaudy everything is, how artistically or perhaps artificially dolled up Alara Psalm was. He suddenly gets the mental image of a tiny dog in a woman's purse. He lets out a hum and reconsiders further. The two brawlers clearly have the family face and eye color. Their dresses are ornate and fancy, but nowhere near the level of their eldest sister. The favoritism is clear, but it may be dodging a bullet. Koga's research had turned up that the second-born down all travel a lot and have started businesses of their own. He had thought it somewhat odd that they spend so much time off Serbo when they were perhaps just 2 or 3 steps away from being full-on royalty. But now, it makes a great deal more sense. The hair-pulling, dress-ripping slap fight boils off as both sisters end up hugging each other and walk off together, sobbing and apologizing. They're heading right to the bar. No doubt to get even drunker on the grape juice on offer there. Time? Koga asks, and Terifus nods before hopping into the dueling pit before it can raise back up. He hops down as well with his geta clacking on the floor smartly. Friendly match, Terifus says, drawing out a full-size war sword from the folds of her dress. First blood or disarm. We both want to be in good enough health to enjoy the party. Koga returns as he fully draws his sword and takes a ready kendo stance. No point showboating around. This was a tried and tested opponent. Perhaps only in a tournament and not a life and death battle. But this wasn't a life or death battle and was, in fact, much closer to a tournament. Her first attack is a stab, blurringly fast and aimed at his left shoulder. She has a clear strength advantage, and he has to slide along the floor as he less parries the blow and more rides it to the side with his sword as a skate. His return swing in the quarter second that her stab stalls out is less a blur and more a flash of light as his sword moves, but she still melts backwards and away. She's using the Battle Princess trick here. Her high-heeled shoes are solid enough for her to balance on a damn spider web, and she could borderline walk on water. So no broken ankles for her. Her next attack is intercepted. She seems to be going for a slash, but he rushes to get into her guard and use the main advantage of a curved weapon over a straight one. Namely in that it can be moved in smaller circles to get quick cuts out. So better at the range where you can smell their breath, which means that Terry Foos can barely get the pommel of her sword in the path of his blade as she backs up furiously to get some kind of distance and bring her sword in. She brings it down despite the terrible mechanics it offers, and he melts to the side. She then reverses the motion and uses the butt of her sword to slide him back. She noticed that he actually has poor traction with his wooden sandals. The sword comes out proper, and he weaves under the blow to pop back up and tries a quick slice before she brings it around again. He gets the guard because this girl is on the ball, and he then has to get some distance because she knows how to leverage that sword. This opens her up to come at him with an upward slash that he slides away from before he goes in for a low cut as she hefts on the momentum of her blade to bring it back down. That's a disadvantage of heavier weapons. The greater mass means that you need to do more to get it to dance the way you want. This gives him tiny openings that are hard to exploit but fun to go for. Then she gets a hold of his elbow and pulls him off balance. Good reminder that the weapon is just a tool the actual threat is using. So he abandons his geta entirely, and with a touch of axiom to keep Thines interesting, skates around Terry Foos in his socks. She wants him sliding around? Fine, he can work with that. But can she work with that? The answer is mixed, as she's off balance but damn game for it anyways. His skating is quickly abandoned and he jumps back into the geta after only a few turns, where she carefully kept facing him and trading faster and faster cuts that each of them parried or dodged. One of them was going to give up just enough space for something to happen, and Terry Foos makes her move as she exhales a lungful of shimmering emerald green fire. She then rushes through it only to find her sword suddenly blocked by the now one-handed katana as Koga holds out the sheath that just ate all the heat of the flame in an instant. They push apart, and as Terry's sword has a sheath of emerald flames climb up its length, Koga changes his stance entirely as the sheath of his katana twists and grows. It takes the form of a dark wooden blade, and he goes into a stance with the wooden sword out front and the steel blade held high. That was supposed to be my win, Terry Foos scolds him lightly, even as her eyes sparkle in the light of the warfire. Since when has a sorcerer ever been an easy win? You think this has been easy? I think this has been fun. He counters before shifting his stance again. The steel blade is lower but still higher than the wooden one, and it seems more defensive at first as it provides a lot of protection from a forward attack. Then he turns to the side and the stance goes from defense to offense. His left hand is ready to lash out with the wooden blade, or he could turn the other way and stab viciously with the katana. It has, but it's time to take it up a level. Sorcery and warfire are more than just a level. Koga reminds her with a bit of a grin. True, same as before. First blood and disarmament? New caveat, Koga says, and an eyebrow goes up. Collateral damage is considered a forfeit. We're the ones in the pit, so we're the only ones in danger. Agreed, Terry Foos says before smiling. Shall we? Yes. Koga answers, and she's suddenly on him and bringing down an avalanche of steel and flame. His swords catch the steel, and the wooden one drinks the flame as he tries to divert the sudden rush to the side. They're skidding backwards as his geta do not have enough traction to slow them down, and he forces the blade to the side before melting away. He takes a cheeky swing with his left sword, but he's right-handed, so it's not as fast or precise as it needs to be to get past Terry's skill level. The wooden sword is batted to the side forcefully, but with the vines of the sword holding on to him even more firmly than he's holding onto the blade, it does not disarm him. It does, however, give him some momentum to bring his katana to slash at her, and she parries that as well. 2 steps, and she gets away from the wall they had been nearing, and doesn't limit her options of motion. Smart. His stance shifts again. He doesn't even hide that the defensive-looking stance is offensive as he turns to the side. Katana pointed downward from above his head, and wooden sword pointed upwards from his waist. This gives him a box to work with, allows him to set up a flurry when she charges. But she doesn't. She sees the potential trap and takes a more solid stance of her own, the wall of sharpened steel and fire between them. A waiting game? There are ways to charge, especially if she's going to use overwhelming strength. He shifts again and is blatantly offensive. His arms cross and both blades are at the ready to either slash in quick succession or at the same time. Even as she examines him, he charges and she countercharges to mess up whatever plan he has, which was part of the plan. The wooden sword comes out first and gives him the leverage to get over the blade. His geta were a bit of a liability, but they're an advantage now as he brings them to life and they drink the fire as well. He's on her weapon but uncut, past her guard, and his katana is coming down. The sword starts swinging to the side, but it's too late. She's forced to let go of the weapon and is disarmed. The sword clatters and he hops off it as it skids away and impacts the wall of the arena. With the war fire fully devoured by his sorcery and it bleeding away most of its momentum in the skid, it doesn't so much as nick the wall. That's a disarm. Koga notes, and Terifus sighs. That it is. You are a slippery piece of work, she says, even as the sheer wildness of his wooden sword retreats and it twists back into a proper sheath. Thank you. There are few better things to be in a fight. Stops you from getting hurt, you see, he says in an amused tone as he tucks the sheath back into his sash and then sheathes his katana with a click. Then he hefts up Terifus's immensely heavy blade and carries it to her. Good duel. Yes it was. She answers with a smile that would look a lot more dainty and shy if she wasn't easily handling a massive war sword in one hand.